child of, I'm not a poster child of AIPAC. No, I'm not that. No, I don't speak, I'm like, whatever, it's just not, but that's my incentive. And my incentive is to go to the people for whom the Jerusalem of loss is their dominant narrative. And to say, if you continue, you mean well in the worst sense of the term. You mean well, but you're destroying the possibility of a future. Now, could you get over yourself and make space, not just for 3 kotels, but for other Jerusalems? Because the Jerusalem that your kids are going to need is different than the Jerusalem that you need.
Is there no use or application of the Jerusalem of loss to develop empathy?
There could be. There could be. It's just very, and it's more, love the stranger for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Is an example. But when you're really experiencing the loss,
you're not healthy enough.
You're not healthy enough. And one of the features of terror is that it is able to perpetuate the Jerusalem of loss in the midst of your power.
Okay.
Because you win. Terrorism doesn't destroy you. It just perpetuates your sense of victimhood despite your power. And that's why it's so morally dangerous. Because now you have powerful people who feel victimized. Now that's this is the profound danger of terror. Because if it defeated you, it's all your energy, and then I win. But you don't win against terror. And the fear defines you, and then your victimhood is perpetuated. And when that victimhood sits on 2,000 years of a narrative, you can't have you can't have empathy. You can't. No empathy. And so, Ruby Rivlin, compare Netanyahu and Ruby Rivlin's speeches at the last Holocaust Memorial ceremony at Yad Vashem. And for Netanyahu, it's all about the Jerusalem of loss. And it's about never again and all that above. And Ruby Rivlin says that he's trying to put in that empathy. And not everybody who disagrees with us is our enemy, and he's trying. But it's not simple. And in the Middle East, it's very, very difficult. Now, not only is it difficult for us, everything that I just mentioned, if you go to the Palestinians,
same thing.
What do I care if somebody kills Jews? What do I give a shit about Jews? Look what they did to me. My loss is the Nakba. Since 1940s and ultimately 48, the world has refused to accept my catastrophe. And it puts a bunch of European Jews who they killed, and as a result of their anti-Semitism and lack of desire to assimilate Jews in their countries, send them to me. And I'm supposed to solve your problems. And since then, every single day, I have a Nakba after a Nakba after a Nakba. Kill them. Who do I kill? Okay, I'm not for terror, but do I really empathize with Jews? What empathy do I have towards Israelis? Same story. Both of us. The tragedy of the Palestinians and Israelis is that both of us are telling stories of loss. And instead of asking, how do we build a future of hope? All of this is not a story about Jerusalem. It's a story about everything that's shaping the politics over the last decades and the years to come. Yes, please, sir.
This is a story also, I think, of the difference of power. All of those visions of Jerusalem change greatly when one is powerful as opposed to one is not.
That is correct.
The story of the relationships of people are different. One has power, one doesn't.
Absolutely correct. And part of what we're experiencing
Unless we recognize what being in control means, we will never hear each other.
I know. Very, very
We We
much.
seem not to as a Jewish community.
It's we're still, and part of the Jerusalem of loss is that you don't connect to your power. You're still by the rivers of Babylon.
Yes.
You're still there. Doneil is still sitting by the rivers of Babylon. He's sitting there and he's trying to prevent it. They're both there at the same time, and there was a difference. This is something that Mark had said to me over lunch. And immediately in the aftermath of 67, there was celebration. It was simple. Everything, wow, Har HaBayit B'Yadeinu. Then comes 73, and we realize that our power is limited. But it's now been 40 years. That power has been solidified. And the ideas that we thought would never, ever be part of our discourse, 50 years after 67, the consequences of power are knocking on our door and demanding something of us. And how we respond to that knock is going to be critical for the future of Israel and for the future of a North American Jewry which wants a relationship with Israel.
When will it be decided?
You don't know. There's not going to be a moment where it gets decided. There's going to be various knocks. And at each time the knock occurs, do you hear? So there was a secret knock a year ago with Kerry and Obama. And in which Arab nations, the Sunni coalition, said we will recognize Israel. And that's the first time that Israel walked away from a potential peace proposal. We always spoke about the fact that Israel has never turned down a peace proposal until a year ago. So was there a knock? So we said it wasn't a real knock. Or the person who's knocking is not the person who has to knock. As I said beforehand, I don't know. Right now, in the next 5 years, I don't believe there's going to be a resolution. So the final knock is not going to be there. But there might be small little knocks. And when we hear these small little knocks, do we say, oh, well, you didn't do this, therefore I don't have to listen to you. You didn't do this, you have to... Or are we going to allow way to lead to way? And then maybe find out that there's a tipping point. Or are we going to want the whole story worked out? It will depend. And if you watch and listen to Israeli politicians, there's this really interesting paradox. And it's there, and it's frustrating, but it's there. Where it's true that the political right are in power. Very few of them use the language of the holiness of the land of Israel or the Jerusalem of God alone to determine their foreign policy. It's shifted to issues of security. But under issues of security, you have people who are arguing not merely for the lack of viability of a peace process now, they are arguing for the lack of a possibility of any peace process ever, which is really motivated by a desire to hold on to all the land of Israel. But they're speaking a language of security, so there's this inner struggle. It's one thing to say now, let's try to create more autonomy, more responsibility. Let's try to create a smaller footprint for Israel's military, a smaller footprint for Israel's settlements. Let's do that so that in the day that will come, if the knock is there, we're ready. But it's all these different narratives. People speak one Jerusalem, but they mean another. And they're hiding that because that doesn't play as well. And whether we're going to respond to the knocks or not, we're going to find out.
Obviously wasn't ready for that.
Israel was not ready for that knock. And part of and many members of Israeli society weren't ready because of the Palestinian terror which was the result of the initial Oslo, put Israelis back in the Jerusalem of loss. And they don't believe that the Jerusalem of hope is possible. But there are those who don't want it, and there's a coalition, and they're speaking they're using the same language, even though their motivations are very, very different. What will be, we don't know.
So it sounds like you're saying the real hope is in education.
No, yes.
Or a big part.
No, the big hope has to be built on the transformation of societies. And unless the societies have to get over their victimhood. I see your hand, I'm going to come. The idea is that people are putting forth the so-called peace proposal in the language of a divorce. When in fact, the geopolitical realities require that it be a marriage. And if you realize you need a marriage, but you're trying to put together a divorce, it's just never going to work. There's too much danger to have a divorce. We can't divorce Palestinians when in the midst of that population, terror is festering and going to attack us. It's only if there could be a new rapprochement. Now, could we marry each other? That's going to take time. We're going to have to date for quite a while. I mean, right now we don't even like each other for good reason. Yes, please.
Yeah, just to your point about time. I think the irony is, they say time heals, right? But the irony to me is that with the passage of time, and I say this as a child of the Holocaust survivor, with the passage of time, the story deepens. It gets deeper into the DNA.
It's a very good observation. The Jerusalem of loss shows you that the passage of time doesn't heal. It worsens. It's another year when we're sitting by the rivers of Babylon.
And similar to that, in Jerusalem of law, what the Christians have done, which is to take on everything that's Jewish and make it their own. I mean, dismiss the future as
That's correct.
So,
Last question or comment? Yes,
the Jerusalem of responsibility is a very difficult one to carry. And do you see sufficient momentum building in any place
No.
for this?
No, not on the political level. Educational institutions use it, but when you speak about the Jerusalem of responsibility, or like the army wanted to, you're called a traitor. You don't love Jews.
In this country as well.
So it's, I'm sorry, yes, please.
To try and bring it to a close on a smiling sight.
I have no psychological need to do so.
Okay. Well, I wanted
And
to...
I know you, so if you want to bring it to a close, I'll leave you with the close. Before the close, yes, sir.
I'm going to go the opposite in terms of the smiling part. But to proceed, though, I believe, I think like you, that the only possibility is one of hope. So going back to what Monty was saying, my background is in terms of defense systems. Time is not on our side. Every year that passes, a nut, it could be a 1 in a billion nut, has the potential to get a weapon that can destroy Israel or the United States. I was on a plane with somebody who clearly was very, very high up, CIA, Livermore National Labs, and he said, they don't talk about if it happens, they talk about when it happens. And there's a reality that the nature of, we have a false pretense of security. So we believe we're okay and we can pass time. But just in terms of the United States, they said in terms of the grid, for whatever the reason. And they said, when it goes down, we lose 80% of the people in 1 year. It's not it, which means we have much bigger problems that we all have to get married about and all have to have this hope. because there will always be a one in a billion person who can come up with some crazy system. Not smiling, but we have no choice but to help, in my opinion.
In order to deal, yes, absolutely correct. And last question or comment?
Once again, the moral superiority of the IDF. They have now been inducting severely disabled young people into the IDF as full military and adapting whatever jobs they can do for them, giving them a sense of worth in Israeli society. I think that's outrageously incredible.
The Army's been doing this for years. For years. The Army's been doing incredible things for years. For years. The Army secretly was drafting Haredim for years before the politicians came and ruined it, and it had to stop. The Army is a place, there's a slogan in the Army, which is Am boneh tzava boneh am. A people build an army, build a people. That is a very, it has great possibility. But right now, what the Army's going to be is part of the conversation too. There's very, very big difference between privates, corporals, sergeants, lieutenants, on the one hand, and when you go to majors, lieutenant colonels, and colonels. And they speak different discourses. And the same process that I spoke about last night is the front line of it is the sergeants, etc. It's not simple. Listen, as I've always said here, being Jewish is not about being happy. It's about being responsible. That's what it is. It's about being responsible. Is this going to be a good story? Is it going to be a bad story? It starts by recognizing what you have to be responsible for. No one's saying it's over. I'm not sitting here. I'm saying there's serious challenges. Har habayit biyadenu. For 50 years, it's now in our hands. It's shaped us. Now, how do we shape it?